Righto, welcome back, everyone. Second episode of Road to Kona with Holly Lawrence. And I'm probably going to throw in a spoiler, but it hasn't been a smooth road. And I think probably we need Holly to explain that sentence. So, Holly, welcome.
Hey, excited to get chatting about everything again.
Yeah, look, I love this series and I love what we're going to be talking about throughout the year. And obviously, it is a big focus on you racing in Kona this year, which I think everyone in the triathlon world is excited about. Um, Last time we caught up, it was obviously post pregnancy and post birth with Poppy, and you had just started getting back, I guess, or you'd been training, but we were talking about getting back into nutrition and doing it sort of pretty seriously and getting back to the old self of using Fuelin. And an unexpected curveball happened about 2 weeks after we recorded that episode. Do you want to go into what happened?
So I was out running, and I felt a pain like in my kind of like deep kind of glute butt area. Felt kind of nervy, but in the back of my head, I text my PT that second after I got back saying, I think I've broken my sacrum. Just because it was something that I knew going in, that it was like the one thing that I knew happened to like nearly every woman running at 6 months. And just because I was like, oh, this is in the area, it was something that I was really trying to avoid the whole time. So then I got an MRI and confirmed a fractured sacrum, which at the time I didn't really, I was really upset, like mad at it happened, because I was actively trying to avoid that very thing, because I've heard so many postpartum returns to running, to triathlon, have fractured their sacrum. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, for me as part of your team, it was, I would say, disappointing to hear. And
You
I guess
sounded
I might.
disappointed.
What's that?
I said you did sound disappointed when I told you.
Well, I think it's because I take, we talk about, the risks of stress fractures and, um, just trying to avoid that from occurring due to, the potential reasons, which we will go into. But it's been actually a really interesting learning curve for me and learning more and more about the implications of that postpartum period as well, because it's not something that I don't believe, well, certainly in my case, I was a specialist in. I still probably wouldn't say that I'm a specialist in that area, but learning and reading a lot more about it made me think, because initially we said, like I said, okay, was training volume too high? Do you think your load was too much? And you were like, no, actually, Sean and I controlled it really well. My initial thought goes to then, okay, well, are you under fueling? Is low energy availability part of this? And look, it very well may be. And, in that period of time, you weren't tracking hard or anything like that. You were eating to feel, but you did gain weight. Obviously, as you came out of the pregnancy, you gave birth, there was a reduction in weight across the period of time. Was there a bit of unintentional underfueling in relation to the training? It's hard to say, potentially. However, reading more about what happens post-pregnancy and calcium requirements, I think that was really fascinating, and how that can impact very short-term bone density. So I know you've read a lot about this, and I think it'd be really interesting for the listeners to hear your experience on what you found as a result of this stress fracture.
Yeah, as soon as it happened, all I wanted to find out was why. Why did this happen? And I got a bone density scan straight after. I had blood tests to see, how is everything looking like. And I was really, I know you were thinking a lot like, is this under eating? And I was really adamant, like, no, I've been actively like trying to maintain the weight. Like obviously you lose a bunch of weight initially when you give birth.
Yeah.
Physically a baby comes out of you, but then there's like water weight, like blood just rolls out of you all the time. It's crazy. But then like I really maintained a weight that I kind of settled in like really quickly. I was like putting cream in my oatmeal. Like I was eating just like really to because I was really diligent. Um, but then yeah, when I was looking into it, I just I was kicking myself for the things that I just like didn't think about. Like, you know, even the calcium, like doing the math of, you know, you can Google how much calcium in breast milk. And I was pumping because she came out early. The lactation advisors were getting me to pump more than I actually needed for her. So I was like producing enough for twins. So that should have been like, okay, that whatever I need from a mineral standpoint too should be like double for, you know, instead of just one child and myself. And then even with the reading I was doing was seeing that during the third trimester, the demands for calcium are as much as like as you're breastfeeding anyway. So could have been potentially at a bad spot kind of at the end of pregnancy without even knowing it. And it's just all of this that there's really no guidance. There's nothing that you can, there's no like clear statements about exercising and pregnancy and postpartum and everything. So it's kind of just like trying to connect the dots after it happens, which is super frustrating. But yeah, I'm still trying to at least to help other people in the future.
Yeah, I think you bang on in terms of a definite dearth in with regards to research around the role of pregnancy and then post pregnancy, and the role of lactation and its impact on the bone. There's not much, and obviously when this happened, I started to read more and more around it. As I said, it's not something that I would typically be that involved in because I don't typically have to deal with this that often. But calcium utilization goes up enormously, and the reason for that is because bone resorption remains that dominant mechanism for supplying calcium to breast milk. And so what we had, as you said, you were producing huge amounts of breast milk, and as a result, that bone resorption and that calcium resorption is probably going to be increased. And I think this is a really good insight for any female who is either pregnant and intends to go back to exercise quite early, is be very cognizant of calcium needs. And so typically we wouldn't I wouldn't normally recommend a calcium supplement because my general belief is that you can get calcium from food and food only, especially around that 1500 milligrams. However, in your case, I think it then became very clear that supplementing with at least 1000 milligrams of calcium per day would make sense in combination with obviously your food and consumption of dairy products. And we can't say whether that has had a definite impact on the healing process, although the healing process is now complete, and we'll get into where you're at in terms of running and that. But I think that was, for me, it was really interesting reading around this increased utilization of calcium as a result of breastfeeding. And again, were you aware of that? Had your doctors, had your midwives, had anyone ever discussed that with you in knowing that you're a professional athlete and knowing that you were returning to sport?
Yeah, no, not at all. Like even during pregnancy, that only one, because they were like, "Is there anything I need to know? Is there anything I should be doing? Is there anything I should be taking, vitamins or whatever?" And they said, "Well, just take a prenatal," and that's the standard guidance. But like even you're making their bones inside of you out of your bones,
Mm.
so like yeah, I mean, if I could go back or in the future, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going to be tracking my calcium intake at least through pregnancy. So you're in a spot because you can't get a DEXA scan or a bone
No.
scan when you're pregnant because it's dangerous for them. So,
For sure.
um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think the focus, as you said, is always on that prenatal and in particular folic acid
Mhm.
or methylfolate, and um, yeah, that and it just doesn't seem to be that focus on calcium, which I know it's talked about, but probably not to the degree that potentially active females need to be made aware of that increased utilization.
Yeah.
Um, and then reading more around it, and we understand the role of estrogen in calcium uptake, and
Mhm.
I think during that lactation period, the estrogen levels are going to drop, and if we think of estrogen, it has a bone protective effect, and so I think with that estrogen dropping and the increase in lactation, then you've got this potentially osteoclastic activity going up, resorption of calcium uh, increasing as a result of breast milk. And so you've got this double whammy. And I think, again, it's sort of just, I think it's important, as you as an athlete going into, and I'm sure you will have more children. Well, I don't know
Mhm.
that, but yeah, you may have more children, and in that case, I think it's going to be really beneficial to think about the next steps for you, and pre-planning sort of that return with respect to specific sort of calcium supplementation as you go through it.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the only thing that in the end that I really presumed that, like, really feel like it must have come down to. But I mean, everyone's just kind of clutching at straws. I spoke to Molly Huddle, the pro runner who came back, had a sacral stress fracture, and she said, "Yeah, I did blood work, and iron seemed, or ferritin seemed low, and whatever." So they're like, and then that gets better, but everyone's kind of clutching at straws after it happened, and there is no real pathway during to really try and prevent it. And I was
Yeah,
actively trying to prevent it because I was like, this happens at 6 months, so I'm going to stop breastfeeding at 6 months. And that was my way of, trying to prevent it. But I didn't really think, well, why is it happening at 6 months? What is the mechanism behind it? Which is kind of still really unknown.
if you, I mean, and just a couple of things in there. Obviously, vitamin D status at the time when we've had it tested, it's been normal throughout.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
good.
your
Yeah.
last reading was 67 nanograms per milliliter, which
Mhm.
puts you in an optimal position. I mean, we usually shoot for 70, so you're pretty much bang on. So,
Mhm.
from a vitamin D perspective, your ferritin level was lower,
Yeah.
yet historically you always are low on ferritin, although during
Mhm.
pregnancy you weren't, which probably explained by a reduction in
Yeah.
activity. Um, but if you had to go back to the time when you started, training again and loading and that, would you change anything?
Honestly, no. And after I broke had the fracture, I like combed through exactly what I did, and the progression was like so conservative that, and you have to remember that, like, I kept up a decent level of training throughout the whole pregnancy, and then I took 3 weeks off, like, almost 3 weeks off after giving birth. But then it was like a really slow progression. I never felt like I was rushing anything. Um, I felt like I was fueling enough and everything. So yeah, it really came out of left field.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly caught me by surprise, I think, and knowing how diligent you were attempting to be in avoiding this, because you had spoken to numerous professional athletes and were aware of numerous professional athletes who had
Mhm.
suffered stress fractures, and you always said to me, "I'm
Of
not
the
going to."
sacrum, and that
Yeah, of the
is
sacrum.
exactly, that bone is, exactly. And I was a lot earlier than typically the women like present with it, and I think maybe that was because I was pumping for the amount that I was, and like the losses were so much more, and it put me into that spot earlier. I even read like case studies because it's called like a insufficiency fracture when
Yep.
it's not really down to training. And I saw case studies of these insufficiency fractures of people fracturing getting out of their car, doing something really mundane, like super early, and it was like down to their milk production and everything. And so, yeah, it's just no one's really just gone about putting a pathway to prevent it. It's just kind of like all these case studies of it happening.
Yeah, I think, and that's where we're at the moment. It is case studies, which unfortunately aren't randomized controlled studies, and there's certainly not anything like systematic reviews or meta analyses sort of providing clear guidance around this. So, unfortunately, I think it comes down to experience and probably for most women, in your case, experiencing and unfortunately experiencing a stress fracture, and then looking at ways in which to avoid that for the future. I think, for those researchers out there, it would be fascinating to get a little bit more information if it is possible. That role of lactation, the role of estrogen, how that has an impact, the role of lactation and its role in calcium requirements for an exercising female, and how much supplementation should be recommended for an exercising female who is breastfeeding based on their training load or training volume. Probably load in terms of volume and intensity, I think, should be really important in terms of that factor. And then, things like other hormones, or there's the parathyroid hormone related protein, which also is impacted through lactation. Its role in osteoclastic activity, its role in what is happening in terms of bone resorption for these sacral stress fractures is under fueling, or is either intentional or unintentional under fueling. Does it play a role in this type of stress fracture? And I guess that's the question. We don't know, because if we think of everything we've talked about with low energy availability and the central role of low energy availability and its role in stress fractures, is it applicable to this particular type of stress fracture? If you were in an energy balance, does that exacerbate the stress fracture? Or if you were in an energy balance or even an energy surplus, can this type of stress fracture still occur? And I guess it's an unanswered question that probably needs to be answered just to try and prevent these for future, for women who are in your situation, but also women who maybe aren't even professional athletes and just want to get back to activity pretty early on. I think ultimately, look, this type of, they call it, what I was reading was lactation induced bone loss. It is reversible. Mm-hmm. As long as, exactly like you did, the time window is respected for the healing process and we get the nutrition absolutely bang on point, which probably is a nice segue into the next bit, where we'll talk about some of the testing and then what you're actually doing. Is there anything else you want to add to that experience around the sacral stress fracture? Was it painful?
I mean, I wouldn't have thought it was a sacral stress fracture if that wasn't the only thing that I thought could happen to me after giving birth and returning to running. And it was just because it almost felt nervy. I would have thought, and even my PT, I saw him the next morning because I texted him and I was like, I think this could be a sacral fracture. And so he got me in like first thing the next morning, and he did all the tests and he was like, no, I really don't think it is. Like, feels nervy, whatever. And we're like, okay, we'll get the MRI anyway. And then 2 days later or whatever, he phoned me and he was like, this sucks. I'm really sorry.
But on that, I think what is really important there as well is that there was a high suspicion because you were aware of it. And I think a lot of the time these are missed. So kudos to you, but also kudos potentially to your PT for saying, okay, well, let's get a scan because of where you were in terms of risk factor, getting it done, not carrying on doing meaningless core stability and stuff like that and saying, oh, we can get this better. And then weeks and months pass and you've still got an underlying stress fracture. So again, I think one really important learning for anyone listening, if you are in the same situation as Holly and you do have this type of nervy sort of irritating buttock pain, don't, like, sometimes excluding is just as good as inclusion. And if it was a case of doing a scan and excluding that stress fracture, it could save you a lot of time.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
One other thing happened to you during post. I think it was just after giving birth, wasn't it? What else happened?
Yeah, it was, I think it was like 3.5 weeks after giving birth, which I told you at the same day that I told you I fractured my sacrum. So then you were like, oh my God, what
It's
is
like,
happening to
for
you?
fuck's sake, Collie.
You were like, you just need to calm down. I went into AFib, which is just when your like heart kicks out. I mean, you would know what it is. Like it feels super weird. I was just riding super easy. I looked back, it was my fourth ride back. I didn't do anything for like almost 3 weeks. I tried to sit on the bike at like 2 weeks and I was like, oh, no, not ready. And I was just doing tons of walking and I like started just like really easy, just like, spinning my legs on the trainer, going like 140 watts or something. I was out just in the sunshine on the deck, riding, doing that. And then all of a sudden, I had my bike computer just on the side, so I wasn't even looking at it. And like, I felt this kind of like fluttery feeling in my chest and like looked down at my bike computer and I saw the heart rate and went, because I always wear a heart rate monitor when I ride. And it went 180, 190, 100, 200, 210, 220. And I like got off the bike. I was like, and got Sean to come and I just like cried at him. And I was like, oh my God, am I dead?
What was Sean's reaction?
He didn't know what was happening. He was just like, oh, okay, Holly.
Did you go straight to hospital?
No. I sat down for half an hour, then got back on the trainer.
Of course you did. My advice would probably be go to hospital if you have a heart rate of 230.
Well, then I didn't believe the heart rate. I didn't believe it, but I had this fluttery feeling then all day, and I kept just telling Sean every now and again, I'm like, I still have this fluttery feeling, and it makes me feel anxious. And then we were lying on the sofa at like 8:30, watching TV. And I was like, I just still have this fluttery feeling in my chest. And so he got my heart rate monitor out and we looked at it and it was at 150 or something, just lying on the sofa. And I'm like, no, that can't be right. So he got his out. It was said the same. So he's like, just text the doctor. Because I take the ostrich approach sometimes. If I'm like, this kind of thing cannot happen to me. Yeah. And he's like, oh yeah. Like he phoned me back straight away. And I'm like, oh God, I'm dead, aren't I? Like he's speaking a really calm voice. And he's like, oh yeah. And then he told me to do this like carotid massage to try and kick me out of it. That didn't work. I'm like getting Sean to just like pummel me in the neck. And then he ordered me a beta blocker and it got me out of it. Like it managed to get to sleep. And then I went in the next morning and did all the tests with him. And he's like, you really should have called me when it happened in the morning, not at 8:30 p.m.
It's always the classic, I'll just wait and see. I'll see how I progress. I remember my dad was a vet. And we'd always get these phone calls late in the day, like, close to midnight. And it would be like a farmer going, yeah, my horse is really sick. And it's like, what time did you notice? And it's like, 8 o'clock this morning, but we just thought we'd just wait. And it's like a classic. So, well, next time your heart rate gets that high, please go to the hospital.
Well, actually now I have this little card device. Have you seen it? Cardia?
No.
You can connect it to your phone, which is really cool if anyone is ever worried that they may or may not be an AFib. And it will do an EKG and you can send it to your doctor and it'll tell you you're an AFib or not. And so, I mean, that's pretty cool.
What is it? A device?
Yeah, it's a device. Cardia.
Oh, we'll have to get we'll get the link and we'll put it in the show notes. And
not sponsored at all, but
no, that's cool. Look, we've got a lot of athletes, I'm sure, have history of cardiac issues and things like that and
Yeah, yeah,
concerns. So,
yeah,
and any pregnant female who
yeah,
has given birth recently is concerned about AFib exercising.
yeah.
Let's anything we can
I'm
do to
like,
help.
I went through all the tests afterwards. Everything checked out normal. Heart looks great. Like, so, and I've not had anything since. So, touch wood, it was just like all the
Sign
cardiovascular
off.
changes, probably massive sleep deprivation, maybe a little dehydration, like all the
Yeah,
above, like terribleness.
just a major event of called
A
giving
major
birth.
event. Yeah.
Okay, so moving beyond, things have progressed well since obviously that day when you mentioned you got a stress fracture, and obviously we
Mhm.
started putting in place things to ensure nutrition was absolutely on point, from protein, fat, carbohydrates, total calories, calcium supplementation, vitamin D supplementation, and whatnot. But we also then looked at, okay, can we get some testing done just to try and see where you're at post pregnancy and compare some of that to your pre-pregnancy values. Now, um, I guess the unfortunate thing with this latest group of testing was that it didn't involve some of the substrate assessment, because it used the VO2 master, which only assesses oxygen.
Mhm.
Doesn't give a measure of carbon dioxide. So you went and got this test done. What did your RMR show, or your resting metabolic rate? I should stress.
This is performance testing, by the way, for
Yeah,
anyone who
performance
not
testing. So
blood testing or anything. Just like to get a baseline for now my new training zones. And yeah, so my RMR, which is like your resting metabolic rate, how many calories you're burning at rest, was almost what it was pre pregnancy, which was kind of surprising, which is like 1669 or something.
yeah, it's like 1670 to 1700, we'll
Mhm.
call it, around that, which is actually consistent. I think
Yeah.
I did push you to try and get it done during pregnancy to see what value it went up to, but we never got that. It fell by
Yeah.
the wayside. I think you had a bit on. So your RMR was done, which is interesting, and it gives us sort of this baseline where we can say, okay, well, we can look at that number, let's call it 1700 calories, and we could potentially say, and what we've talked about internally is, okay, we never want to go, RMR plus 10% as a absolute baseline for you to never get below. And look, it's never going to happen. I mean, that would put you at 1800,
Mhm.
1900 calories in a day. Now, that may happen if you weren't, say, exercising, but that's highly unlikely as well, given who you are. But that's what sort of where we at least see what that absolute floor is, which I think is important for us to recognize, and also for you as an athlete to recognize and go, okay, well, that's where it is. And then we can layer on top certain other elements of your total calorie requirements, things like your non exercise activity, thermogenesis, or NEAT, where we can take that as, say, around 500 calories, and then layer on top all your activity and the sort of caloric requirements from there. And I think over the last week, just looking at it, your average daily intake, including sessions, sits at around about 3,200 calories.
Yeah, something like that.
How do you feel with that amount? Because some people might hear that amount and go, "Oh, that's not that high," but then others might go, "Oh, wow, that is a lot of calories." How do you feel personally with that sort of caloric intake at the moment?
I mean, pretty good. But training isn't, that hard right now. I haven't done anything super long. I mean, it obviously changes day to day with depending on what training I've got. But yeah, I mean, feels pretty good. I mean, I think first of all, when I initially got tested and my RMR was like 70, under 1700 calories, I was super surprised because you just assume like a healthy, fit person with some kind of muscle mass, like, has the recommended like 2000 calories a day is for like a, non-exercising person. So I was surprised that it's as low as it is. Um, but then it
See,
kind of,
see, I'd argue that 2,000 calories a day is massively overstated for the
oh,
average
really?
person. Hugely overstated. Think the average person does not move enough, and if they
Yeah.
continue to eat 2,000 calories, which is highly unlikely, they'll only eat 2,000 calories anyway.
Mm.
just based on a standard American diet. If we're talking about America, like it's just not going to happen. Like I honestly, if you look at the amount of movement that the average person does in a day and the average amount of actual exercise, if you're
Or the
eating
amount of muscle mass they have.
and you're eating 2000 calories and someone like yourself, obviously, like from your, it will go up. RMR will go up as an individual's weight goes up as well. So people who are heavier generally have higher RMRs. But I mean, my RMR sits pretty close to what yours is. Like it's not
No
that much
way.
higher. No, I sit at like just over 1800.
See,
Like
I'm surprised
this
that.
is, yeah. So like I think there is, and when I get sent through athletes going, I had my RMR done, it's 2,500 calories. I'm like,
Yeah.
bullshit. It's not 2,500 calories. The way in which you got measured was probably incorrect. So
Mm.
the measurement, like the way in which a measurement of RMR, any metabolic testing, has to be standardized. So typically what you'll get is, and this is what I always recommend to an individual, is they should be coming into relaxed firstly. Don't rush to your appointment. So don't leave it to the last minute to get in the door because you've got an appointment at 11 o'clock and you're arriving at 11:01, because instantly you're stressed. And that's going to push up things like your heart rate. It's going to push up your breathing, which is instantly going to potentially impact the results. You should be seated or lying down for at least 15 minutes before a test. The test should be done on a slight incline. And then the test itself should take 15 to 20 minutes. It should be ideally a full face mask, or some form of face mask, and it should be very relaxed. Unfortunately, I think a lot of what we're seeing, because it's becoming more popular with this sort of metabolic assessment, we're seeing a lot of studios opening where the technician isn't taking the time to assess it properly. And as a result, a lot of these numbers are sky high and they're not an accurate assessment of what the athlete requires. So for anyone who has had a test done and goes, oh my God, my test was nothing like that, potentially speak to the people who tested you and maybe get retested and see what the difference was. Because it as you say, I think you're surprised by your number. I'm not at all. I think it's a very normal number for someone like yourself,
Mm.
of female in your weight category, around that 16 to 1700 calories.
I think it's just because we've always heard, 2000 is for like the, average person that doesn't exercise. So you think, oh, athletes will be burning like 3,000 calories just at rest. But it's just
Yeah,
not the
no.
case at all.
No. And you got to remember that 2,000 calories is taking into account RMR, NEAT, activity, and
Yeah,
blah,
yeah,
blah,
yeah,
blah.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it's not their resting metabolic rate. But yeah, look, I think it's something that is poorly understood by a lot of
Mm.
individuals, and caloric requirements often, I think, are overestimated. And I think, look, things like, you've seen the research on trackers and wearables where, you have estimations of caloric expenditure somewhere between 20 to 50% overestimation. And we get this all the time at Fuelin, like athletes going, oh, my wearable says that I burnt 3,000 calories today. And you're like, really? Like you did sort of an hour and a half of running. I very much doubt that you, or an hour and a half of biking, I doubt that you actually burnt 3,000 calories during that session. So I think always take some of this with a pinch of salt, like these estimations. And I think, uh, body weight is just as important to use as a measure. How your clothes are fitting is a simple thing as well. Like, the difference between the start of the week and the end of the week, if you are following a nutrition program, what impact does it have from a practical perspective? Are you dropping weight? Are you maintaining weight? Are you gaining weight? That's probably going to give you a good indication whether you're in caloric deficit, an isocaloric state, or a surplus. And that's probably a very simplistic way of looking at it. But I think for a lot of people, that's probably as much information as they require to, keep them on the straight and narrow. Obviously, things like subjective well-being, how you're feeling, energy, sleep, muscle soreness, motivation to train, and sickness comes into it as well. With your testing, Holly, what else did you find from like a performance perspective? Where, like, how many weeks are you now post pregnancy?
Oh God, I've given up on
Or
weeks now.
months? Go months. Go months. Go months.
Weeks is the whole pregnancy, and you're
six
like,
six
never did
months.
I ever counting weeks before. Yeah, 6 months. Oh yeah, because we just literally went to Poppy's 6 month checkup.
Okay, so
Um,
6 months in, where are you comparing from a VO2 max, LT1, LT2 type perspective?
so numbers all like almost identical to what they were pre Miami last year, but obviously weight's just a little high. But then that's like super promising. But I wasn't doing it as like, a test. It was more just to know, the correct zones to be
Ballparks.
doing everything in. Yeah. More just to help training. And next time I do a test, I want to get all that metabolic data too, just so we can like know exactly how much carbs I'm burning, how much fat I'm burning at whatever intensity, and like that. Obviously, data is like super useful.
Yeah, so you're saying that effectively the zones have remained fairly consistent from pre-pregnancy to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have to go back and compare, but I think like just the absolute numbers, not like
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
kilogram, are actually like higher than um, pre Miami last year.
Yeah, that's exciting. It's exciting to
Yeah,
see
it's the
that.
differential zone two work all
I
pregnancy.
Well, that's why. I mean, I know, like, again, not. I don't want to sound like I'm a source of disappointment in your life, but I was like, when you got the when I got the metabolic testing back, I was like, so where's your fat max? What's your, MFO, your max fat oxidation? Like, where were we at compared to what you were doing? Like, were we, we assessed all that, and I was like, okay, what do we got? And you're like, oh, I don't have it. And I was like, "Ugh." So, I mean, where I sit with this is that we just don't have this information for pregnancy and post
Yeah.
pregnancy, which is why I'm really interested in it. Yes, it's N equals one, but I think it is going to be fascinating for you as an individual, but also for other women hearing how your body adapted
Hmm.
to the training, to pregnancy and post pregnancy. So I know you're going to get that done, and I am excited to see that. And I think we'll talk about that definitely on episode number
Yeah.
3.
I mean,
If
you
we,
wanted me to get testing like all the way through pregnancy because you would like wanted to know everything. I'm like, I actually don't. Just like I'll get tested afterwards.
I know it's like communism, isn't it? It's like good in theory, but just in practice, it never works. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the thought of, I mean, yeah, it's classic male mentality, isn't it? Oh, Holly, just get on a bike and just pedal, and
Just
you're
do
like,
the VO2 max test.
I know, I know.
Fine.
So anyway,
I mean,
I
there's
should
no
know that
difference to what I was
having
doing at training,
having
but
had 2 children of my own, I should know that that was never going to happen, but it was worth asking.
yeah.
If we talk about nutrition specifically, I think where we're at now, I feel really good as a practitioner. And you as an athlete, how are you feeling with regards to nutrition at the moment?
Yeah, really good. It's just been nice to get back on fueling because I was obviously stopped tracking for like the longest time during pregnancy. I didn't want to, track, and just almost like when you're just taking time off because like it's still a lot to do, when you're on your phone, but then when especially after the fracture and everything, I was like, I really just need to start tracking just so then exactly, there's no question marks, there's no, because even before, when I think I'm having things and it's just always different unless you're actually just measuring and tracking it. So that's just been like nice, and now it just takes a week of making yourself do it and then it's habit again, and
Yeah.
it's always just like the starting of something, it's just like until you make it habit, and then yeah it's just been easy to make sure that I'm fueling enough around training. And it's, yeah, I mean, like I've always just relied on it.
It was interesting as well because obviously the transition of you sort of having some time off, which
Mm.
I fully supported, and I speaking to you and Sky Munch was like absolutely women.
Well, I was still using the app
But
to
you
like
weren't
know
tracking hard, and
what
that's fine.
I
Yeah.
wasn't like tracking.
No,
I
I
wasn't
think
inputting what I was doing, but I was still
exactly.
like I would still use it as a guide.
Yeah. But I mean, even then, like I was like, I know how much you have on. Like, there's a lot going on when you're pregnant, and obviously after pregnancy. So I think like, but during that period, obviously, as a company, we remodeled Fuelin, and
Mhm.
obviously we've just announced the new launch of Fuelin 2.0. So it was an interesting sort of transition. You sort of were transitioning out of Fuelin 1, not tracking hard, to then coming back and you're like, okay, now I've got a completely new product in my hand that you sort of need to get used to again.
Mhm.
I mean, it's very similar in terms of the functionality, but some changes and some features that have, I think, from my perspective as a coach, it's really nice, and obviously interested to get your take as an athlete. One of the things we used to always do was have the nutrition separate from the training nutrition, and what we introduced as a result of athletes' feedback was that they also wanted a filter or a view where they could have the in-session fueling combined with the day-to-day fueling to give them a better understanding of total caloric intake. And I know you were a big fan of keeping it separate,
Mhm.
because you like that. How have you found that filter, and where are you at with it? What filter views are you tending to use? Are you using meals only and activity, or do you use the combination, or do you
I
use all three?
actually toggle in between now
Yeah,
in the day. So like I'll look like I'll first of all like in the morning I'll look at it like meals only and I'll like take out like once I know like yeah the swim there's yeah okay not
yeah,
having anything in swim or whatever it is. Um but then like once I've done the bike and I input my bike fueling and then like I'll go to meals and activities and then you can see like well because like if you didn't quite line up in the bike but then like you're like oh I've got a bit of wiggle room or whatever it is it's like you can just see like the holistic like whole view but then I like being able to just view meals only because it's always just like a huge number to me when it's like yeah everything and I just like I like personally thinking about this as my just like eating in the day just to like not be overeating not undereating this is just being in balance and then what's in training is to like fuel those sessions so I like kind of parking each into yeah.
yeah. No, and it makes it nice because I sort of look at your day to day and I say, okay, we're probably going to keep you somewhere in that 24 to 2600 calorie sort of amount, and then factor in your protein and your fat and your carbs around that. And then we look at, as you say, when you have high training volume, I know that number gets very high as a result of
Mhm.
in session fueling. And I can imagine, whether it female or male, sometimes those numbers do get very high and it can become quite daunting when you see those numbers because you're like, oh, wow, I really need to fuel this. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm really dyslexic when it comes to numbers, which I don't know if I've ever told you. So numbers really don't mean much to me, which is a really nice thing. But still like if you're like, "Oh, I'm used to these numbers," and then you see different numbers. That's why if you just see meals only, it's always in and around,
Yeah.
something that you're used to. And then if you see a big number in exercise, you're like, oh, well, that's because I've just got this huge bike ride or something.
And I think, look, that's why we introduced the filter because we had a lot of athletes coming in and they were saying, oh, my days look very similar. And it's like, no, 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 look at your in session fueling and layer that on top.
Mm,
And then they're suddenly seeing that and going, oh, God, okay, now I see I'm taking in an extra 3,000 calories on that day because of the in session fueling, especially if they've got some long
mm,
rides or runs. So I think it's a move in the right direction. I know, um, one thing I want to do, and we're working on this as a fast feature sort of follow, is that we will bring into that view of meals only, still having the sessions
mhm,
in that view. So you can still see how the meal timing fits with the sessions, although just in terms of the meal rings, in terms of protein, fat, carbs, and calories, the in-session fueling won't count towards those in that view. And I think that's, again, I think it's just it makes sense. It provides a really clear view for the athlete to see meal timing, but then also see how meals only is impacting their total calories for the day.
Yeah.
Protein at the moment, coping okay? I mean, you always eat a fair bit of protein. We've got you set anywhere from 150 to 170 grams a day. What are you eating mainly at the moment?
Having a lot of yogurt, still like in the mornings.
Is
Always
that
have.
because of the calcium? You're also sort of in the back of your mind, you think, yeah, okay, I want to get some extra
Yeah, I
calcium
mean,
in.
that's something I started doing like post pregnancy, like having a lot of like dairy. Because I've gone through periods of time of like omitting dairy, um, and then I didn't have any ill effects obviously during pregnancy with dairy, so I just went full on dairy again. um, and then like have some kind of protein for lunch and protein for dinner with like chicken, steak, beef, whatever,
Yeah.
salmon, and then normally have leftover protein or whatever for lunch, so that kind of takes care of it.
Are you sort of compared to during pregnancy and post pregnancy, has there been sort of any big shifts in terms of your preference for different types of protein? Like, do you have a sudden craving for red meat now versus during pregnancy you had
Yeah,
a real
well,
dislike?
during pregnancy, I really hated chicken. Like I couldn't deal with like raw chicken. Like I could not think about like cooking raw chicken. So Sean would have to do that if he did. But I really kind of went off chicken, and just really wanted red meat, which I don't know if that was because like naturally my ferritin was plummeting, and I don't know. Like I always think you kind of crave things you actually need. So
Yeah.
I'm always like, if you crave something, go at it, which maybe is not a good thing for most people. Um,
If I
but yeah.
lived by that, I'd probably be eating chicken McNuggets, and that's a terrible thing. So, um, okay, so protein's pretty much back to where you were. What about fat? Have you got cravings? I mean, again, just for openness and just so we know where Holly sits somewhere between as a very baseline level or a floor around 60 grams, but at the moment, I mean, anywhere up to 130, 140 grams of fat per day to meet her caloric requirements. What are you tending to eat from fat type of foods? What are you
Yeah, I
tending to
mean,
focus on?
I feel like the fat normally just takes care of itself. Like I always put like peanut butter on toast, like before training in the morning. I was having a lot of like full fat dairy like immediately post pregnancy, and like up until recently when I've obviously been caring a bit more about my weight. Now when we've been like manipulating fat a bit more. But yeah, like, whatever's in meat and salmon and, everything that's, avocados and yeah, it normally just kind of takes care of
What
itself.
What's your oil of choice? What do you tend to use a lot
Um,
of?
I've always used avocado oil just because I don't have to worry about high heats. I've
Okay.
always, I
You
don't
use
know.
that over olive oil. You tend to. I
Yeah,
always
just
find the flavor of
because.
avocado oil. I don't know. It's something about it.
Yeah, no, I don't mind it. It's just like instead of having a bunch of oils, I just have avocado oil and don't worry
Hmm.
about the heat aspect.
Yeah, I tend to. I use a lot of extra virgin olive oil,
But
and
do
then I
you
use I
cook with
use canola. I use canola oil. Um,
it?
no, it's all right. It's a monounsaturated fat. I'm all right with a little bit of. I don't use it a lot.
Yeah.
Um, because of this bloody keto diet, I'm eating a lot of ghee and butter,
Oh gosh.
which is obviously a lot of saturated fats and
Mhm.
oils, which is going to be fascinating on my lipids when I get those done. Um, and then I will use avocado oil. So I tend to rotate it though, just based on what
Mhm.
it is. But salads, definitely salads and steamed veggies and things like that. I'll always use
Olive
extra
oil.
virgin olive oil as opposed to avocado
Mhm.
oil. I think it's a bit cheaper here in Australia as well. Avocado oil
Really?
tends to be very expensive, so
Mm.
but so can olive oil. So anyway, and carbs, obviously everyone's favorite topic. Your carb intake is ranging at its lowest 300 grams a day
Mhm.
and upwards of 650 grams a day at the moment. And I wouldn't say your intensity in training is high. I
Mhm.
think you'd agree. So, I think that's really interesting. And we did highlight this previously where you were consuming anywhere from 5 to 7 grams of carbs per day, and when doing all your zone 2 training, and still saw your your max fat oxidation number jump will nearly double during that period. So I think that's again why I'm very interested to see what the metabolic
Mhm.
testing does in terms of substrate utilization, to see where you're at now, and has it dropped a lot, or is it actually maintained, and where you're at with that. So what in terms of carbs, what are you eating on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, like oatmeal in the mornings, like bread, like before training was like a pre-training snack with like bananas, always fruit, rice. We're big like rice people. Have a rice cooker, use sushi rice, like
Yeah.
yeah, big rice.
Any grains, any new grains? Do you try any sort of things like buckwheat
From
or
time to
feta?
time, yeah, like I'll use like I'll make oatmeals like out of different things like
Yeah.
buckwheat or quinoa and what's the other one? There's been like loads of random ones that I'll just like get something and just try it and like always go back to oats, but
We've been doing a bit of Israeli couscous, the big, the
okay, yeah,
pearl couscous. It just looks cool.
mm,
It's good.
yeah,
Actually, I should say as well, about back to protein. Mel did a pork belly in the air fryer last night,
okay,
and it is. If you go on the Instagram, actually, I showed me chopping it.
okay.
Perfect, crispy,
I've
crackling.
never had a pork belly. Isn't that like
Oh my
really
god,
fatty?
pork belly is like
That would be like my whole fat for the whole day.
I mean, on the keto diet, it's perfect. I
Yeah.
literally ate 500 grams of the stuff,
Mhm.
and but honestly, if you've got an air fryer, I'll put the recipe up somewhere in Fuelin or whatever. But
Okay.
45 minutes in the air fryer, and it was
Mhm.
just perfect. And I don't know, it makes my mouth water just thinking about it.
You
So
know, I
pork
really
belly,
don't
big
eat
fan.
pork.
Oh, big
Really
fan.
don't eat pork. I don't know
I
why.
I do a lot of pulled pork, like
Okay.
barbecue style pulled pork,
Mm.
pork roast, pork loin, pork
Mm.
belly. I love it. It is a bit of a fatty cut, so I can
Yeah.
understand why a lot of
But some
people
pork
probably
can
don't like
be
it.
super lean, right? Like pork loins can be
You can
lean.
get pork loin, which is lean if you remove the skin and don't have the
Mm.
crackling. But generally speaking, I think pork is regarded as a fairly fatty cut.
Okay.
It wouldn't be my
I think I had food
recommended.
poisoning once at pork and it was like kind of off the menu
Yeah,
after that.
that'll do it. That'll
Yeah.
do it. So, um, in terms of carbs, you are taking on carbs during your sessions. What are you
Mhm.
using at the moment? Are you preferring liquids? Are you preferring gels?
Yeah, so I use like a big mixture of between carb drink, which I use Z2, it's a new sponsor of mine.
Who are
They
they? I actually don't know
You
them
don't
that
know?
well.
They're
Well,
Brazilian.
you told me they're Brazilian.
Mhm.
I remember I was like, okay, are they tested? And you were like, yes, we're getting that done. And they came
Yeah,
back with, they have NSF Sport, don't they?
they're getting informed sport. Yeah.
Informed Sport, sorry,
Mhm.
for testing that, because that was my biggest concern,
Yeah,
obviously because of the risk of contamination. So they're just correct me. They're a Brazilian company called Z2,
yeah. Z2. I mean,
Z2.
I'm British, so I'd say Z, but I'm now American, so I say Z.
Okay,
Um,
I'll say
and
Z too.
um, yeah, they have just like kind of like every product that an athlete needs, like carb drinks, gels. Gels is like their like big thing, and I've always been someone that like doesn't really have gels. I've always had the chews, like from my
Yep.
race nutrition, but like my teeth get so sore now from chews. Like I think I've like really damaged my teeth from having chews.
Yeah.
And these gels are just like so liquidy that like everything that I hated about gels, these don't have. So like I really like them and they're just like super fruity Brazilian flavors. Like one's pitaya, which is dragon fruit. Like
Yep.
it's just like super fruity. So then I have like carb drink. gels, like for when I've transitioned to doing like threshold work. So that's when I'll be having gels. And I do in the pool also for swim sets. Now we're doing like big 4K like threshold swims. So we're like, I've got like 3 gels lined up, which yeah, it's just makes it way easier to get in than like obviously in the winter I was like eating rice cakes and stuff, but as intensity kind of goes up, then you're like, okay, no, I need the like easy like stuff that feels good, that feels like it just like slips in.
Yeah, no, that's it's always nice to see and hear athletes talking about yeah, new products that they find. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of new products flooding the market all the time, and we always joke about it. It's like how many combinations of fructose and maltodextrin can you have and create a new
Yeah.
marketing push? But look, it really comes down to if the ingredients are based on what we know in the science,
Mhm.
and then it's really flavor and
Mhm.
consistency that makes the difference. And as long as you can cope with them, then I think that's fine. And obviously, having the Informed Sport or NSF Sport or HASTA stamp of certification is a big, really important, especially not just for professional athletes, but I think all athletes understanding where their products are coming from and the reducing that risk. It's not an absolute. It's not going to be 100% foolproof, but it certainly
Mhm.
reduces the risk of a contamination occurring. So it's important.
Yeah.
You mentioned dairy, so we don't worry about that. What about fruits and veggies? Are you getting them in?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've never been someone that like you need to try and convince. Like before we started working together, like I probably overate vegetables because I was like probably a little bit more like carb phobic. So then like vegetables kind of took precedent. And like even I'd be eating broccoli the day before a race, which now with you I don't. So like if anything, like I'm not that person that you speak about that like you're trying to increase fruit and vegetables, but like it's more just having a more rounded view of everything kind of holistically, not being scared of carbs anymore, and maybe not risking broccoli the day before a
No,
race.
no, and I think it's always fascinating to go back. I mean, it's been a number of years since we've worked
Yeah, I know.
together, and
I was trying to think.
talking about that, like, yeah, and obviously vegetables are carbohydrates in that sense, but I think to your point, like you always have said, yeah, I just was nervous of eating moderate or higher glycemic carbohydrates because of what was instilled in you, and so
Mhm.
yeah, the fruits and vegetables has never been a problem. It's probably been more, as you say, trying to get you to reduce them at certain times, just knowing how they could or potentially have an impact, especially
Mhm.
things like broccoli the day before. Um, any particular fruits that you're really getting into at the moment?
Um, I mean, now it's starting to get like warm and feel like summer. Like I made a grapefruit salad today, and like because I've really not wanted anything cold, like no salads or anything.
Yeah.
I've like all just like warm vegetables or like warm food. So, and I honestly wondered if I'd like never go back to eating a salad again because like pregnancy or something. Like I was like, oh, maybe that just changed me. But today I was like, no, I really want a salad. So yeah, now I'm back.
Okay, that's
Warm
good.
medals
We
back.
we might have to get that. I love grapefruit and salads and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
me
we
too.
might have to get Holly's grapefruit salad to
Yeah.
and put that into Fuelin. Okay, I am conscious of time. Quick recap: supplements at the moment, everyone's favorite topic.
Hmm.
Creatine monohydrate. You stop during pregnancy and during breastfeeding. Now
Hmm.
that you've stopped, have you restarted?
Nope.
Not yet. When are you going to start again? I know you haven't. I know that you hadn't started, but when are you
No,
going?
no.
Is it the concern that you might put on some weight, some water weight?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we
Okay.
can have this conversation now if you like.
No, no. Look, I knew that was the reason.
Yeah.
And look, it's always one of those ones because you are trying to lose a couple of kilos to get back to,
Mhm.
this initial race weight for your next race. Um, my argument would be it is a little bit of water weight, and that's not going to massively affect you. I think based on a 5 gram per day, I don't think you're going to see those changes. Would I recommend it to you at this point in time? Absolutely. I think it's always an athlete choice.
Yeah. My only thing was I never felt, and I took it for, gosh, I don't even know how long, like a long, long time, but I never felt a positive benefit from taking it. And I knew when I stopped taking it, then like, oh, I felt no difference.
Yeah, there are
So,
non-responders. There are non-responders to creatine. Yeah, it's always one of those ones. Are you, you know,
when the science kind of like it tells you that there is so much
benefits?
positive signals for it, but I always like to try something for myself and see, can I notice the difference? And then it's either something that I stay or goes. But I have started taking beta alanine.
Oh, you're
So
taking that at the moment, and you're feeling
uh-huh.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's good.
I
That's
always
good.
split up a dose because otherwise
Six
I
point four grams,
it
6.4 grams for the day, and what you're just splitting it up into.
in twice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, and
doses.
that's a yep. I think it's a great. I like beta alanine even for endurance athletes. I think
Mm-hmm.
given that you're going back into a lot of the higher intensity repeat sort of interval training and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
I think it is very beneficial in terms of that training effect. And I
And
think
I
if you
do
can,
notice the difference with it. So I'm
yeah,
someone that really struggles with like high end power, high end like sprinting in the pool, whatever it is. And even after starting taking it for, and I think it's like a 4 to 6 weeks loading phase.
it's
But
usually 28 days. Yeah,
even after a week of taking it, I felt, and it could be placebo,
so
whatever.
good
And
placebo.
I'm all for placebos, but I felt the difference of doing like sprints in the pool. So you're like, great, okay, and like it's not that I'm a sprinter or whatever, but if it helps me train in some way, then I'm like, yeah, that's great. Oh, there are no downsides for that for me. So
No, look, I think there's certainly no, as long as the form of beta alanine and where you're getting it from is reputable and
yeah.
tested, which I know it is. I think there's absolutely no issues with taking it, and I think it is a supplement that I use with a lot of high end athletes. So it's I'm glad you're taking that. Calcium, we touched on. You're taking 1,000 milligrams a day,
Yep.
and that's just a mainstay at this point in
Mhm.
time. I think we said we would take that at least for the next 6 months, just as a
Yeah.
safe standard. Vitamin D status, it's excellent. How much are you taking
Mhm.
per day?
5,000 I use a
IU
day.
per day. Yep.
Yep.
And that's a tested brand as well,
Yep.
so that's good. Collagen, always an interesting one. We probably could deep dive into collagen, but
Yep.
we won't. But are you taking collagen?
Yes, I am. And it's something that since I had the Achilles, I don't know, from the navicular years and years ago, on the loading back, because there was like research papers at the time, and this was in 2017, 2018, whenever it was, of taking like 20 grams of collagen like 30 minutes pre doing whatever,
Loading. Yep.
loading, whether that was like going for a run, whether it was strength training, whatever it was for that, injury. So then ever since I've always just kept it. So I'll put it in my tea, like you hide it and things, but I know you should be taking vitamin C with it. And so there's like sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. Because if it's with breakfast, yeah, I've got blueberries and whatever. But
It's interesting because I mean, look, most people. It's not like we have a pandemic of scurvy blighting society at the moment. So vitamin C intake, given that you have fruit and vegetables in your daily diet, is
mhm,
probably on point. Can taking extra vitamin C improve things like collagen synthesis potentially in that
and
bioavailability
probably
of the
good to
collagen?
be at the
So
same time.
yeah, look, it probably makes sense. Interestingly, I reached out to Dr. Keith Barr, who is a expert in collagen, and he well at this point in time he's agreed to come on the show. So hopefully I don't curse it, but he's going to come on the show, and similar to what I did with Stu Phillips, we're going to do a deep dive. With Stu, obviously did the deep dive into protein endurance athletes.
Mhm.
We're going to do a deep dive into collagen.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
tendons and bones. So it should be really
Mhm.
interesting. So we'll have more information on that.
Mhm.
Your iron supplement
Yep, still taking iron.
every other day.
every other day. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Which,
we just need to try and just monitor. I think with Holly, with you, it's always just monitoring. We know
yeah.
historically you do have lower ferritin, hemoglobin, and your transferrin saturation are always pretty good. So it's, it's one of those things where we've talked about, is there some potential absorption issues? Do we look at, ways to try and improve that? We've talked about, and we can probably get into that next show about some of the strategies where we're trying to improve the
Mhm.
absorption of the iron through potentially probiotic or prebiotic supplementation and seeing if that has a positive impact on her iron levels. Apart from that, Holly, you are running. How's the running going?
It's good. Touch wood. I'm still being super conservative just because one, the doctor the like sports doctor that's been overseeing everything, he is generally like pretty conservative with this stuff, which I hate, but I also like that, it's keeping me
I
from.
think you need a little bit of that, to be honest. So it's all right.
Yeah.
I'm not one to be conservative, generally speaking. However, I think there are individuals who maybe need a little bit of conservative approach because knowing they won't 100% listen to you anyway and they'll go and do their thing. But in the back of their mind, they might actually have a little bit of like, yeah, he's probably telling me that I shouldn't be doing this. So, and Sean's probably chirping in your ear as well, going, do you really, sure you need to do that? So, but it's going well. The running's going well, which is exciting. We're seeing, you're seeing good results on the road. Bike's been great the whole way through.
Mhm.
And you swum and biked the entire way through
Yeah.
with this stress fracture, which I think it
Mhm.
was interesting and well controlled by the PT team and the
Mhm.
rehabilitation. So I think that's all been managed
Yeah.
exceedingly well. And as you say, touch wood, it's just continued. It's volume now, isn't it? Bit of intensity, and I think next time we chat, we will hopefully have some solid metabolic testing to
Mhm.
discuss.
Mhm.
We will have. When is your race?
I was going to say a race on the calendar.
Yeah, you've got a race on the calendar. Are you happy to sort of open up and say which race you're doing?
Well, the first, like, I don't know what, like, the first race will be, but my first main race will be Lake Placid to try and qualify for
And
World
that's
Championships.
the full distance.
Yeah, full
Yeah.
distance.
Okay. And what's the date on that? Just for everyone.
I think July
Roughly.
20th.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got that
It's
out
in
of my
July.
head.
It's
I
late July.
don't.
It is late July. So
Yeah.
are you going to do a race before that?
Yeah, I want to race in June. So yeah, maybe like a T100, maybe a 70.3, just kind of seeing how
Yeah.
that plans out.
Well, that'll be
Yeah.
exciting to see you
Yeah.
back on course. I'm sure everyone will be very excited and cheering you along, and I'm sure Sean and Poppy will be out there as well. So,
Yeah, I can't wait.
look, as always, entertaining, interesting. I always learn something that you haven't told me, and we talk about it live, and I'm
It'll
like,
be a live session, yeah.
I know. But anyway, um, I'm super pleased that where you are now in terms of your road to Kona and the road to recovery. I think it's great that it happened and you caught it so early on and
Mhm.
managed it so well. I think from this point onwards, it's only going to get better and you're going to get stronger and fitter. And uh, looking forward to the first race. And unless you've got anything you want to add, we can end it there.
No, I think that's it. But I never actually called it an injury, so I'm still not calling it an injury. It was only a blip.
A blip. It was a road bump. It was a road bump on the, or
Mhm.
a speed bump on the road to Kona, we shall
Mhm.
say. So, very good. Okay. Well, thanks, Holly. And until next time, we'll catch you soon.
Yeah, thanks.